Hello to everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you also for all the conference team, which made us really great first 2 days. So I'm going to talk to you today about tactile science education for visually impaired children, the life cycle of the brimstone butterfly. So I'm Janja Plazar I'm actually the science educator at the University of Primorska. I'm teaching science to the students, which are going to be once teachers in elementary schools and in kindergartens, but also special educators. So I'm teaching physics, biology, and so on. But I'm collaborating a lot with this next name. So my colleague, Axinia Kermano, which is also with us today. And she's a special educator for blind children. The third name, here on the slide is our student, our master student. So actually we are supervising her on doing to adapt the educational tools for teaching science for blind and actually for visually impaired students, which are also blind are included. If you're maybe wondering where Slovenia is, it's a very small country. It's somewhere in between Italy and Austria and Hungary. So it's there. Okay. So why science education? So science is difficult, so why teach children science? But science contributes to a child's development, they say, and with acquiring scientific knowledge and basic scientific concepts. By developing the ability to think and solve problems in a logical and scientific manner. It also contributes to learn them to work together in groups, also to develop positive personality traits, and especially to better understand the world and the environment around children. So researchers suggest that science education should begin as soon as possible in a child's development, so already in the preschool years. So we all know who are in contact with children that children really have this innate natural need for observing, to think and explore in nature. So actually what we think of biology and physics now, they already start when they are extremely small, where already they start to play in the sand and collect the stones and cones and shells, and they really like to get dirty in the mud. So that's already beginning of science. So like this, with exploring the nature around them, they get these first insights in the world of science. So all these that we as parents find not very nice always, but we have to keep in mind that this is a very good basis for understanding complex phenomena and processes in later stage of the child cognitive development. So they also discovered lately that preschool children have a much greater potential for learning and understanding as has been assumed. But they need, already from the beginning, in the earliest days, they need a rich and challenging environment and also a science teacher. Why a science teacher? If they have already the nature around them, but they also need somebody to explain them nature and its phenomena, and this needs to be in a simple, of course, that they can comprehend it, but scientifically completely correct way. Why is that? Already we heard before that it wouldn't be aha moments later in life, so that we would actually skip these misconceptions about science later in the adult stage. So these misconceptions are getting less and less present in everyday school. Why? Because actually science education, it starts to be taught in a different way than it once was. Once the teachers were teaching science that they were like me now standing on the podium and were teaching students what is a cell and what is deer, what is the forest. But children were listening to this. Well, in the last decades, this is changing. So it's changing to contemporary instructional approaches. And one of the most common lately is the constructivism. Why constructivism? Actually, children in this way of teaching are active in the teaching process, in the learning process. So actually, they get the experience when they are actively learning a scientific topic, and then they understand it better, and they construct their own knowledge, like a house with bricks. So this leads more to a permanent knowledge, and also, with this we minimize the misconceptions later in life. On the basis of what we all said now, we can understand that science needs to be taught to everybody, not only to the fully sighted children, but also to the visually impaired children. And as I said before, in the past, science was taught in a traditional way, which was based on visual concepts, which was, as we can understand, inaccessible to visually impaired children. And we know that they perceive the world in a different way, but they have, most of them, the same range of cognitive abilities. So we need to adapt educational methods and educational tools. I won't be talking about 3D modeling now, so more traditional modeling now, and you will then understand why. So we said that children need to be active when they are learning science. So how we can activate them? So if we don't stimulate curiosity in visually impaired children, they are not active, they are more passive. So we need to stimulate curiosity in a way. And this, with actively involving them into the learning process, they better understand natural processes and phenomena, of course. So all the techniques need to rely on other senses. In this way, we need to keep in mind when we adjust educational methods and tools. So what are the general rules? I'm sure that most of you understand this and know this already, so I'm going to go through it very quickly. So the elements must be very explicit and generalized without details. That might hinder tactile perception. Also, proportions need to be correct. They must be simple and of suitable size. Also, the materials need to resemble a real image of the object or a concept. So rough material represents warm. For example, here in this picture, it's a tactile image of a knight. So his armor is shiny and cold, and the skin is soft and warm. It feels warm if you touch it. And of course, it needs to be safe to the child which is using it. So now I'm going to go into the second half of my title. So the life cycle of the brimstone butterfly. Why did we decide to adapt this kind of natural phenomena? So first, brimstone butterfly, does anybody know it? It's a very yellow butterfly. It's very common in this southern part of Europe where we are living. And why life cycle of the butterfly? Like many processes in nature, like distant things or things we cannot touch always, or the weather, or for example the rainbow and these kind of things, they are very hard to perceive for visually impaired children. Especially with butterflies, this is it's very hard to explain sometimes. For example, here we see the image of a life cycle. It represents an adult stage of the butterfly, which lays an egg, and then from this egg a caterpillar is it's developed, and from the caterpillar the pupa. The next stage is a pupa, and from the pupa the adult butterfly is transformed. Actually, it's developed. So for many preschool children, fully sighted children, even this is hard to perceive. It's hard to perceive this is the same animal. You know, that caterpillar and the adult are actually one thing. They are one animal. So we presented the life cycle of the brimstone butterfly in two ways. The first way, the first presentation was the physical model. Here we see the model that contains the removable elements of the individual stages of the butterfly's life cycle. So here in the bigger picture, we see the big butterfly, the yellow one, with very, very soft wings, which develops into a pupa, which is hanging on a stick. It's a big green one. And then from this pupa, the caterpillar, which is soft, made of silicone, so it's soft to the touch, transforms. And then, well, I'm going to the wrong way now. Yeah, but okay, we can see also the egg. So, well, now transform it to the other way that I was talking to you. And here on the right side, here, this is our student, Anna, which is making the model. So it was a very hard work. She was testing many, many materials which were of suitable touch, that were resembling as much as possible to the real animal. And the second presentation is the tactile picture book that I also have here with me. So after the lecture, you can also come here and see it. So this is the front page. Also, the picture of it is also on the presentation. And different well, images that are also depicted here. So I also invite all the blind people to come to touch it. So what is in the picture book? It's a story. It's a story about the butterfly with all the life stages of the butterfly cycle. And in the end of the book, there are also exercises about the habitat where this butterfly is living. I forgot to say that also, of course, everything is written in Braille. So we tested these both presentations, the tactile picture book and also the model, in 4 groups of children. The first one was visually impaired. It was the group of visually impaired preschool children. There were only 2 in this group, so 2 and 4-year-old blind children. Then there were visually impaired elementary school children, 5 blind children of 9 to 12 years. And then we tested this in 2 groups of fully sighted preschool children. The first group was with 15 children of 3 to 4 years. And in the second group, there were 6 children from 5 to 6 years. In each group, before and after introducing adapted educational tools, an interview with every child was performed on the knowledge of butterflies, their life cycle, and of the habitat of the brimstone butterfly. So how did it look like in all these groups? In the first group, with 2 children, both were blind, well, the first 2-year-old couldn't follow it, but he had also some cognitive disabilities, so we couldn't perform really the experiment with him. But with 4-year-old blind child, it was completely different. So he followed the story in a tactile book without any troubles, and after reading the story, he recognized all the stages of the butterfly in the physical model. So these stages he also took out, touched them, and he connected them with the images in the tactile book. This was also interesting in a group with visually impaired elementary school children. On the left picture, we can see our student talking to 5 blind children in the group. They were from 9 to 12 years old. It was really nice because they all could read the story in Braille. First, they were very surprised that brimstone butterfly, this is not a name just of this butterfly, but it's a species name, because this butterfly is described in many books and poems in Slovenia, as it's so common. So this was again one misconception that they got over it. So they were very interested in material. They were touching it a lot. They never touched a butterfly before, as probably nobody of you ever did, maybe just a few of you. So they were very intrigued by it. They thought it's a real butterfly in the physical model. They were also intrigued by the caterpillar a lot, so some girls also found it very gross. So and they, in the end of the book, they all successfully solved the exercises on the habitat of the butterfly. Then we performed also this experiment in two groups with fully sighted children. The first group was with 15 children of 3 to 4 years old. They had very, very little knowledge on the life cycle of butterflies. But they were extremely intrigued by the tactile book. They really, really liked it. So none of them was visually impaired. So they like to touch different stages of the butterflies. They really like to touch all the plants, which are also depicted in this tactile book. And they were really interested in Braille. They never been in touch with it before. But when we started to put the bandages on their eyes, it was too hard for them to touch anything. So they really wanted to find out what's on the picture, but it was too hard. For example, for 3-year-olds, it was almost impossible. Then in the group with older children, their knowledge was a little bit slightly higher about the butterfly and its life cycle, but they were also extremely intrigued by the tactile book, by everything connected with blind. And they were also interested, they were asking what are the techniques to make these tactile books and how to present to children which don't see whatever in nature. And we saw after the experiment that also their knowledge on the butterflies increased after introducing these two presentations, so the tactile book and the physical model. So if we evaluate our research, so the knowledge on butterflies before introducing the adapted educational tools in the groups was really scarce in all groups. In every group was a significant increase in knowledge of knowledge and perception about the life cycle and its habitat after introducing the adapted educational tools. And in both groups of fully sighted children, extreme interest in perception of blind children was noticed, like interest in tactile books, touching different materials, and also Braille. They really wanted to learn it, also the older children. So we can conclude that all children, both fully sighted and visually impaired, could benefit from adapted educational tools, which use other senses than vision. And so we can see that these educational tools can be successfully used in inclusive classrooms. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'd like to open it up for questions. So I'm curious what the next project, the next science learning tool you're going to create and evaluate is going to be?
Yeah, actually we have really many educational tools already. So we were discussing with my colleague that we could also make a stand next time. So we already made the model of a heart and pulmonary, like the whole vascular system. And yeah, well, many things that are already done. And about the tides and so on, the planets. But yeah, this can be done also with 3D modeling. I think with these animals it's hard because the materials, yeah, with 3D modeling is great, I think. But in some things you still need to use these other techniques to feel the difference in texture. But yeah, if somebody is interested in these things, then just come to me later.
That's great.